Welcome back to the deep dive. So, today we're tackling something, well, something that feels like an economic hand grenade, really.
It really is. We're looking at sources that take a sledgehammer to, one of the most fundamental ideas in our economy, the shareholder system.
And it's more than just a critique. The argument our sources are making today is uh, deeply provocative.
That's putting it mildly. They argue that this system, the one we're told is the engine of growth, is actually, well, they call it legalized theft.
Legalized theft. So
Uh,
our mission today is to really unpack that, to get into this non-traditional viewpoint and understand the mechanics of why they call it an extraction
They
mechanism.
really want to shock you into reevaluating what feels normal. The sources start with this scenario.
Right, the factory scenario.
Exactly. Imagine you walk into a factory, you see people working hard, and you demand half of what they produce
Why?
just because you bought a piece of paper.
You'd be laughed out of the building or arrested.
Of course, but the source argues that's exactly what the global market does every single day, and it's perfectly legal.
So we've just given it a polite name, ownership.
Precisely. They say we've put a legal title on an exploitative structure. They don't even call it the shareholder system. They call it a sophisticated gambling ring where bets are placed on human lives.
Wow. Okay, that sets the tone. So let's unpack that core idea, the thesis of extraction.
To do that, they have to completely dismantle the idea that shareholders are productive,
And
right?
use this central metaphor to do it, which I found devastatingly effective, the horse race.
It's so simple, and it just perfectly separates value creation from value receipt.
Okay, so in their analogy, you have the horses.
And the horses, of course, are the employees.
They're the ones who train, sweat, break their bodies, and run the race.
Mm-hmm.
They're creating all the value, writing the code, making the product.
Mm-hmm. And then you have the ticket holders, the shareholder.
And what do?
They sit in the stands, they watch a screen. The source is very clear on this. They contribute 0 calories to the effort. They're just gambling on the outcome.
And this is where the source says the delusion comes in.
Yes,
In a real horse race, you'd never say the person with the winning ticket helped the horse run faster.
never. But in the stock market, we've somehow convinced ourselves that the gamblers are owners, and so they deserve the prize money.
And that delusion is what makes the whole extraction model possible.
It is. The sources spend a lot of time on how that value gets siphoned off. It's usually through 2 main channels: dividends and stock buybacks.
Okay, let's slow down there because the mechanics are really key to their argument about theft. Stock buybacks, for instance. How do they function as extraction?
Well, think about it. A company makes a profit. Now, management has a choice.
They can reinvest it.
Right. Higher wages for the workers, new equipment, R&D, things that help the company long term.
Oh.
Or they can funnel that cash directly to the shareholders.
And buybacks are the most direct way to do that,
Absolutely. The company uses its own money the workers generated, to buy its own stock. This reduces the number of shares out there.
which artificially inflates the price of the ones that are left.
Exactly. No new product was made, no innovation happened, but the stock price goes up, the passive holders get richer.
So instead of rewarding the people who made the profit,
Yeah.
you're rewarding the people who placed the bet. The source is unflinching here. That's not investment, it's extraction.
And that leads right into the second major point of the critique, doesn't it? This massive imbalance of risk.
It's the moral core of the argument, really. This idea of ownership without responsibility.
The shareholder gets all the potential reward, but they're insulated from any real-world consequences.
Let's just compare the risk profiles.
Okay, so say a company does something terrible to hit a quarterly target. They poison a river, they lay off 5,000 people. What happens to the shareholder?
Not much, honestly. At worst, their portfolio takes a little dip. Yeah. A few percentage points on a graph.
And as the source notes, they can often hedge against that loss anyway. Right. For anyone who isn't deep in finance, what does hedging mean here?
It just means they spread their risk.
Yeah.
They own shares in hundreds of companies. If one goes down, it's just a tiny part of their total wealth.
They can even use other financial tools to bet against a stock, protecting themselves from bad news. It's all just numbers on a screen.
Okay, now contrast that with the worker.
The worker can't hedge their job.
No.
Their entire livelihood, their health insurance, it's all tied up in that one company. If it fails, they lose everything. Their risk is total.
And if the company cuts corners on safety to please those shareholders,
The worker is the one who gets hurt. Literally.
this is where it gets so sharp the comparison is just, it's visceral.
It is. The shareholder is playing with chips, abstract assets.
And the worker is playing with their life, their family's future.
And that disparity is why the source uses language like thievery. They say if people really understood this transfer of wealth from the people creating it to the people just watching.
They demand a ban on the whole system.
An immediate ban.
I mean, I get the moral argument, but an immediate ban on the entire global stock market? That sounds, a little impractical. Catastrophic, maybe.
It does.
The market is how companies raise capital, right?
Mm.
How do you do that without just collapsing everything?
That's the right question. And the source has an answer that is just as radical as the critique. They say the solution is structurally simple.
Which is?
Mandatory employee ownership.
So the rule is simple.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't work at the company, you can't own a piece of it.
That's it. Ownership has to be tied to labor. No more external shares. If you work there, you get equity. If you just provide capital, you get repaid like a loan, but you don't get a permanent claim on the profits.
So we're talking about an entire economy of employee-owned companies.
Mm-hmm.
The sources say this leads to 3 big benefits. The first is true skin in the game.
Right. It means you can't just accumulate wealth by moving money around anymore. If you want a piece of the harvest, you have to, clock in. You have to actually contribute.
The second benefit is the one I find really compelling. It's the shift to long-term thinking.
It completely changes the timeline, doesn't it? An external shareholder can cash out in 5 seconds. They want short-term profit.
So they demand things that might hurt the company later, like firing the R&D team to make the quarterly numbers look good.
Because they don't care if the company exists in 5 years. They only care about the stock price right now.
But an employee owner is totally different.
Completely. Their job, their retirement, it all depends on that company being healthy in 20 years.
So they have a built-in incentive to invest in quality, in innovation.
In building something that lasts. They're not chasing a chart, they're building a future.
Okay, and that brings us to the final, most incendiary claim. The end of the parasite class. That is some strong language.
It is. But what they mean by that, by rent seekers, are people who profit without creating value.
They're just extracting wealth from systems that already exist.
Like an external shareholder. The source calls them parasitic because their wealth requires value to be siphoned away from the productive workers.
So by tying ownership to labor, you eliminate that entire class. You force capital to actually serve the business.
Instead of the other way around. To quote the source, it forces capital to serve labor rather than enslave it.
That makes sense conceptually, but let's go back to that practical question.
Yeah.
What about a new company, a startup?
Right.
If I have a brilliant idea, but I need $50 million to get it off the ground, I can't sell shares anymore. So how does the factory get built?
The source addresses this. They say capital would still be available, but it would be debt.
Like a bank loan.
Exactly. Bank loans, bonds, things like that. The investor gets paid back with interest, a guaranteed return, but they don't get a perpetual claim on all future profits.
So they're a lender, not an owner.
A lender, not an owner. Their risk is rewarded with a fixed, finite payment. Once the loan is repaid, their connection to the company is over.
It keeps control and the profits with the people actually doing the work.
That's the goal.
So this all circles back to where we started. The source argues the stock market isn't the engine of the economy.
Not at all. They say it's just a very sophisticated extraction mechanism.
An infrastructure designed specifically to separate the worker from the value they create.
Mm-hmm. Funneling the rewards from the people on the field to the people in the stands.
And they end with that incredibly vivid image right back to the beginning.
The stock market is a casino where the house always wins.
And the workers are just the chips on the table.
So the final demand is a moral one. It's simple. It's time to close the betting window.
You want to reap the harvest, you have to plow the field.
That's the standard they're demanding.
It's a powerful and deeply challenging idea. I mean, it goes against everything we're taught about how an economy is supposed to work.
It forces you to ask a really hard question about who deserves what.
It really does. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. If the whole point of a business is to make a profit, and we accept this idea of tying ownership only to labor, does that just change who gets to keep the money?
Or does it maybe change the very definition of what profit is in the first place?